This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and this is episode number 266. For this one, I'm in the Ballard District of Seattle. You know, we've done a lot of podcasts with brewers right here in the Ballard District. It might be one of the most focused areas of tightly knit brewers who we've all done podcasts with because there is an incredible wealth of talent right here in the Ballard District of Seattle. Joining me for this episode of the podcast is Barry Chan of Lucky Envelope. Welcome to the podcast, Barry.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. Really appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I appreciate you coming down to our Brewery Accelerator last month, or actually it was July in Portland, Oregon. It was fun to see you there. I wasn't expecting to see you, and then of course Juno from BSG had invited you down. I was like, and then we got to hang out and get to spend some time together and talk, and thought it would be nice since I was up here in this area to get a conversation in, because you have both a classical and a creative element to the brewing that you do here at Lucky Envelope. Also trying to pull in some cultural influences from background and try different things, and we're going to talk about all of that through this episode. You use very creative ingredients, but you also focus on the beer like I'm drinking now, your Munich Helles, which I think you won a GABF medal for a number of years ago too.
In 2015. So that was our first medal that we won, which is it's a fun bar to try to keep getting to try to reach.
Sure. So you can brew in very classic approaches that are very to the style approaches to classic styles, but you also push and I was just gonna say you push the envelope on that one, and it would just be my terrible dad joke.
I don't get that.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to talk about how you use creative ingredients and work them in a way that's sensible and layered, that creates drinkable beers, not necessarily stunt beers, that uses those ingredients in delicate but in nuanced kinds of ways. Before we do that, for nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. G&D stands above the rest as the only chiller manufacturer that engineers your glycol piping for free. G&D also stands alone as the only chiller manufacturer with an in-house team of installers and engineers with 30 years of real-world field labor experience in breweries, wineries, and distilleries. Contact the Total Glycol System Design experts today at gdchillers.com. Also, what if you could take your favorite recipes and make a non-alcoholic version without sacrificing the flavor, color, or beer quality? NA, no problem. The Alchemator from ProBrew uses proprietary membrane technology to strip the alcohol from beer without sacrificing all the elements like flavor and color that make the beer great. Are you ready to brew like a pro? Check out www.probrew.com to learn more about the Alchemator from ProBrew, or shoot them an email at contactus@probrew.com today. ProBrew is a subsidiary of Technoblend, now a ProMock brand. So Barry, give me the Lucky Envelope story. I know we've personally talked about this before, and you were part of a killer homebrew club with a bunch of folks that have now gone pro in the Seattle brewing world. A nice group of contemporaries to all help each other and also balance each other and then compete against each other at the same time. But yeah, talk to me about that moment for you with craft beer. Where was your connection to craft beer? How'd you get into brewing, and then how'd you decide to then make a career out of it?
Yeah, the way I started out was when I was doing recruiting trips for college, and my first craft beer I ever had.
What were you being recruited for?
Swimming.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
cool.
So my first craft beer I ever had was a Victory Hop Devil, and that beer kind of blew my mind.
Sure.
Somebody I knew said, "Here, give this a little sip," and I think at that time it was an IPA that was 60, 70 IBUs, and I just said, "This is crazy," and I didn't really like it. But since then, I kind of became interested in craft beer, and that was my first introduction. And from there, I would go on to just go try any new beer that I could find, and you know, you have your little nerdy notebook and try to make those mental notes and find those styles that you like. But
Where in Pennsylvania were you?
I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So at the end of the Weird Al Yankovic Amish Paradise music video, it says "Welcome to Lancaster."
Oh, I'm familiar with it. For I don't know 2008, 2009 ish. I was living in New York City and would manage a group that was based out of Malvern. So I would take the train down once a week down to the 30th Philly station, and take it back out on the line to Paoli and work out in Malvern, and which is also why I spent a lot of time out at Victory where I could in Downingtown.
Yep, the original location.
Yeah, back at that original spot, or going to Wegmans and stocking up on as much craft beer that I could expense at the time.
That was before my time. Oh, that was after my time, because when I left Pennsylvania, you could still only buy beer at the beer distributor.
Yeah. Wegmans changed that.
Man.
And man, I don't know what they did with the law there, but you could walk in and just buy 6 packs right there. Oh, it's the best.
That's awesome.
It's the best. I'd hole up in my hotel room that night and just try what I could from anyway. That's neither here nor there.
Yeah. And then after that, my introduction to homebrewing was at the time I was in grad school. I was in LA. So I was in LA and I was visiting my girlfriend, now spouse, Catherine. She was doing vet school at UC Davis. So I'd do my quick little flights back and forth back when with Southwest, those cheap and quick. There was a time when I got to know the bartender at the Gordon Biersch in the terminal at LAX, and I remember ordering a Bock, and I was drinking it, and I was in my IPA stage, and I said, "Man, this beer needs more hops in it. Like there needs to be more hop expression." And then Mo, the bartender, just looked at me, and I had this realization, like, "Oh my God! Like I just made this comment about a beer." And I know nothing about the style. Like, who am I to do this? Like, to have that, I know what my preferences are, but like the intent of this beer. And that was my realization moment that I don't know how to brew. I should probably shut up and, figure it out. So it was a little challenge to myself. Once I finished grad school at UCLA, I moved up to Seattle for, a big boy job. And from there, I bought my first homebrew kit from Bob's Homebrew, which is no longer in business. But a lot of brewers that I know, professional brewers and homebrewers, got their start at Bob's. So there's a lot of nostalgia there. And started homebrewing. And kind of as you start out, there's few batches are okay, but not great. And I wanted to learn more about it, so that's where I started. Finding books, podcasts, anything I could about it, and Charlie Papazian's book, anything I could find at that time. That's still probably in the infancy of podcasts, but there were a few out there.
Sure.
And the Seattle Library had a really good brewing reference section, so got my hands on all those, and I think my beer substantially improved after that. But kind of going back to like recruiting trip and swimming, I sometimes get a little competitive to a fault. And
sure.
So started entering competitions. And with that, like you kind of get that bug, you get addicted. And it's fun to get that unbiased opinion of your beer. And, if you take home a little hardware, that's always a nice little side thing.
Sure.
But that's kind of how I started. And, right around 2012 or so, I was, still at the same job I had in Seattle, structural engineering. And I was getting I was getting pushed into the middle management stuff. So project management and all that. And that was not what I envisioned becoming an engineer for. It didn't resonate with me. So at that point, it's kind of, I guess that's the midlife crisis that a lot of people will encounter. And
stay around long enough and you'll end up being the manager, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's when I started talking with one of my buddies, who's my business partner, Raymond, and we started talking about what we wanted to do. And he just wanted to start a business. And he traveled around the country after he quit his job to see if he had any business partners, but find any potential business partners. But he, nobody was dumb enough to go all in except for me. And but we both wanted to go in together, and we ended up putting some pencil to paper and working on business plans and all that. 2013, and that's where we are. That's how the brewery ended up getting started. And I ended up quitting my job in August of 2014 when Catherine was 7 months pregnant, and that's just immediately just got in and started going full bore on the brewery, from build out all the way through production and everything.
It's an insane thing to do with a newborn at home.
Oh, I mean that's one of those beautiful things about being naive, a new business owner, because you don't know any better. So would I ever recommend anybody do that? Absolutely not. But sometimes you think you're the bee's knees, and that'll reality can hit you pretty hard, but you just kind of have to deal with it, and you press forward. And I like to think that we ended up doing something positive out of it.
Sure. No, that's the entrepreneurial spirit, because everything will try to crush you along the way.
Oh yeah.
You will never have any time, no matter what. I mean, that's the kind of thing with kids too, right? You never have the right and enough time or enough resources at that stage in your life when you should be having kids to actually, spend time with them or spend the money on, never do. And then of course later in life you have more time and more money. But then, anyway.
Ain't that the truth?
Life is always working against you in some sort of way. Yeah. Well, let's talk about then, how you started developing an idea of what Lucky Envelope would be. But before we do that, is your brewery struggling to source or afford berry ingredients? Historic heat waves devastated U.S. berry crops, causing supply to dwindle and prices to skyrocket. That's why brewers are switching over to Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends, which mimic straight concentrates but at a better price point and with a more reliable supply. Is it any surprise that Old Orchard's best sellers are raspberry and blackberry flavors? Reclaim your margins and order your craft concentrates at oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, packaging beer can be a daunting task, but buying cans shouldn't be. American Canning provides packaging supplies at competitive prices in order quantities catered to craft. Think single truckloads and half-height pallets rather than million can minimums. For a smooth packaging experience, also consider their ultra-compact single-operator canning machines. Pricing begins at $25,000 with a quick 6 to 8 week lead time on most equipment. American Canning exists to help share your craft in cans. Learn more about their ecosystem of solutions at americancanning.com. All right, Barry. So you decide to start this business, you and your partner Raymond, and you need to. Of course, 2013 breweries are on the rise. 2014, things are growing. Certainly not as saturated as it is now. What did you envision for Lucky Envelope, and how did you start to try to create an identity? Because were still plenty of great breweries here in Seattle at the time, and you needed to figure out an identity that was going to set you apart from that.
Yeah, absolutely. As it happens when you're starting a brewery, the name is incredibly important, and we're a lot of those just involve sessions, just hanging out at a bar or at someone's house, and you're just spitballing ideas. And we had a bunch of ideas for names, whether it's named after my dog or named after the street we're on or named after our neighborhood. But then what we ended up falling on was Lucky Envelope Brewing, because Raymond and myself are both Chinese American, and the red envelopes that you get during the Lunar New Year were such a important and very warm memory that we both have as kids. So a little bit of history with the Lucky Red Envelope is it kind of originated during the Lunar New Year as a gift where the older generation gives the younger generation a red envelope with money in it. And the original version of it was they would hang red ribbons with coins strung through the hole in the center above people's doorways, and the red is supposed to ward off evil spirits, and the money is supposed to bring you good luck. So it's evolved into the red envelope, and for us, maybe to the point that I learned from you at the Brewery Accelerator during your branding talk was that the story.
I didn't put you up to this.
I recommend it highly. The story is huge, and if there's something that's that important to you and it helps you differentiate yourself in the market, that was one of those things where we thought that might be an avenue that we would like to go. However, we also at that time knew that the market was, very skewed to the, white and male, and there was not a lot of Asian influence or Asian American presence in the brewing industry. So when we started out, our brand was actually very intentionally generic. And what we wanted to do was make sure that we established ourselves as a brewery first. We didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves into only using Asian-inspired ingredients. So we opened up actually very traditionally. We had, I think, one beer that used Thai lime leaves and lemongrass in there. And the logo itself was pretty simple. And so that's how we opened
That's
up.
fascinating. You were a little worried or conscious that
Yes.
this male white audience in craft beer might find it a little like not for them if it were too Asian inspired.
Yeah, and in our first month of opening, we had kind of our worst fears confirmed.
Really?
Yeah, it was nothing. It was one of those things where it wasn't intended to be mean, but we were kind of taken aback because we opened up with your IPA, our pale ale, our Helles lager, and then we had a triple that we do with Thai lime leaves and lemongrass, and we opened up. People really liked the beers, and then maybe like 3 weeks later, we had a neighbor come by, and he said, "Oh, you have a lot of beers on tap that I wasn't expecting. One of my friends stopped by here and said that you only offered Chinese beers." And we just said, "Oh, that's interesting. That's not what we're going for, but that kind of is that hole that people can go down. They can see something, and then they'll take a mile from that little bit of an inch that you kind of offer up." But with that, this kind of goes to my background maybe as an engineer, and I'll be kind of dorky with that. But structural engineering. A building that stands above the ground is nothing without a strong foundation. So we didn't want to start using kind of more non-traditional ingredients until we knew that we could have our base style of beers that were well made and both with what people liked, what we liked, and then critically kind of with awards and all that stuff.
Sure.
Whether it's just the good feedback, where it's a clean beer and everything. So that GABF win in 2015 was huge, where we said, okay, I think we're onto something. I think our fundamentals, they're not quite there, but we can always improve. And but that's a good base. And then
it's a message to the audience here that you are very capable of that technical brewing prowess and and something so classical.
Yeah, and it's just when you're kind of growing up as a home brewer and you see all this stuff, and like there's such an imposter syndrome feeling that you have going on. So this kind of was a little poke to say, like, okay, maybe you know what you're doing, and it felt good, but we know that we're
all
that
imposters. We all are.
Aren't we all? Yeah.
And I hear that from a lot of brewers out there, and brewers who send us beer at the magazine and score incredibly highly. And we'll own up to that. It's like I feel like an imposter. I mean, I feel like an imposter sitting here talking to people a lot of the time, people who know much more about brewing than I do, and I just try to keep up most of the time. So I think that's a natural thing.
Yeah.
It is good to have some of that validation though, and also just to create that license then for you to say, hey, I think we can move past this phase now.
Exactly, and that's what we ended up doing. We did well in in the Washington Beer Awards with our base IPA too, so that was great. And those two combined gave us the kind of that validation, the kind of the empowerment to kind of push on beyond our original logo, we ended up getting a redesign of the logo, and we definitely wanted to kind of embrace a little bit more of the weird ingredients. And it was, not even weird. They're just not atypical.
Sure.
And
there's a big world of ingredients out there, and of course, the subset of American beer has just grabbed onto a small piece of that. And we're seeing more and more experimentation on that. But so let's talk about that. Like, how did you then start to branch out and build identities, and also start thinking about how ingredients and some of these ingredients, that you are, attracted to, might work in specific styles?
So the beers I really love to drink are lagers, and that's kind of what we based many of our beers, many of our inspirations off of. But then, as you get some confidence in playing with those styles, playing with those ingredients, we can definitely move beyond that and figure out how to integrate with other styles. But the one that kind of in that right around that time frame, there was some news coming around about an ancient Chinese dig site in Shaanxi, China, and that was I believe the oldest known beer produced, which is about 5,000 years ago. So what I ended up doing was just cold emailing the Stanford archaeologists on what they were doing, and they were very gracious, and they just sent me the paper that they did that with the research. So we took that recipe, and we took the paper, read it, I read through it, and I looked at the ingredients that they found, and I noticed that a lot of the ingredients that were found in amphora, which are just the pots are lying around, which showed signs of damage to the grain, which indicates that they were used for brewing. A lot of those ingredients were stuff that my parents would use in soups when I was little. The gross soups with that I didn't like as a kid, but I've come to definitely appreciate now. And I said, this would be a fun beer to try. And I think this is one of the first ones that we did. And we made a version of that, and we just took the percentages of those ingredients, which was Pilsner. There's barley. Job's Tears barley, which is seed from a grass, lily flowers, yam, snake gourd root, which is a squash. So we just said, let's go for this. And I think we did it for a Lunar New Year celebration, one of our second one. And we made a historical beer out of it, and people really dug it. And it kind of was a really cool connection to all aspects, like so many aspects of my past, and then kind of historically, in the whole, when you take into account beer, it was a great tie together, because the significance of that find was, I think, a lot of the history up until that dig site in China would say that Mesopotamia, right around 2,500 to 3,000 years ago, was like the birthplace of kind of beer brewing. But to find a dig site in China 5,000 years ago, with barley, which was barley that was found on site, and the barley wasn't grown in China at that time. So there was evidence of trade happening in different parts of Asia, and specifically for the brewing of beer, alcoholic beverages,
Right.
and preserving of drinking liquid.
You have this historical, backing. You start making this historical beer, but it's also, basically, this newer iteration on like a field beer, or it's not, it's different, but it's not so different. I mean, people here are used to pumpkin beers. I mean, it's probably not too far from that.
No. And yeah, that was the great part, was we had no idea how it was going to taste. And once we got together, we fermented it with, at that point, it was just modern Cal Ale yeast, and it was a clean one. But the lily flowers that were in the beer gave this really beautiful, perfumey, flowery, raisiny character. And people just said, "Yeah, this kind of tastes like a saison," and it was like, boom! It was really cool to see that reception, and then people being able to relate to it, but with a different style that we weren't intending to create. And that was wonderful. We were very happy with the way that came out. And then from there, we were, playing around with other ingredients in other beers that we've done. I think one of our more common recurring ones is using Lapsang Souchong tea in our base Helles lager, just because I love Lapsang Souchong tea, and then kind of going back to those lager roots that I really love is Rauch beer, smoked beer, but it has a unique twist to it. So it's just to have the tea infusion, which is black tea that's just smoked over pine needles, adds a definite smoke character, but it's much different than you would get from, say, a beechwood or an oak smoked wheat or anything like that, any of those malts.
So it's a straight malt beer, but then the smoke component comes from the smoked tea.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, we're now layering phenol, components in this beer, and that sounds a little bit crazy. But talk to me about that, because obviously, especially when you're using something like tea, which can have that strong kind of, that phenol component, it can get out of hand really quickly, and you also have to be careful about yeast, because yeast can produce similar notes depending on how you ferment it. How do you find subtlety, especially within the kind of scope of a Helles style base for a beer like that?
It's just experimenting and finding the right dosing, whatever works with the beer that you're doing, what your goal is. But surprisingly, Lapsang Souchong tea, even though it's pretty intense, even if you go heavy on it, it still makes for a nice beer, and like it doesn't overwhelm as easily as I would have expected. And that's one of those fun things that we've discovered with brewing with things like tea, is that there is a little bit of wiggle room, but you definitely can overdo it. But just the experimentations, pulling off small batches, doing small things. And that's one of those, we do that at the brewery pretty often, is we have little special event days, which is kind of our pilot day to see like which of these weird, wacky ideas that we have could potentially become a beer that we do on a production scale. And, we'll play around with a lot of random things, and they're not necessarily just, Asian ingredients, but, we'll make beers with Swedish fish, something like that, of course, but again, like if you're doing a keg at a time, there's definitely room to experiment, and we're not betting the a whole batch on it. So
there's also quite a few different tea purveyors out there. There's varying levels of quality, but then there's also teas that will interact with beer in different kinds of ways. How do you evaluate if you're say looking at an ingredient like tea and finding the right tea to work in? I mean, I've talked to lots of brewers about how they work coffee into beer. We've had that conversation many times here on the podcast. We've not really talked about evaluating and adding tea, and what some of that process looks like also for extraction, and and how you might do that.
Yeah, a lot of it, you'll start out with something along the lines of cold steeping, or you might, I guess the first step is you taste it as it's intended to be consumed.
Yeah.
So you'll get like your whatever 180 degree water, 170 degree water. It depends on the type of tea, and you just make it to the instructions that whoever your tea purveyor tells you, however you want to do it. And we'll taste it from there. We'll see which ones are pleasant, which ones are might not work. But even if they don't work specifically for that, in that preparation, then we will also go to try it maybe on the cold side as well. So that maybe, that's something that pops up a lot, is green teas, because they're not fully fermented. Those leaves are, there's a lot of grassy character in there, and you'll extract a lot of that in the on the hot side, and you have to be very careful with your steeping times and everything. But sometimes in some occasions, those flavors don't necessarily get extracted in the beer if you're doing a cold extraction. But it depends on what you're looking for. Like if you're looking to do a hot steep for like a sanitizing or something like that, then you might get those tannins or those grassy characters to come out of the tea. So you're just you need to figure out what your goal is, and if the beer is going to get packaged or anything like that, and then you just go from there.
Sure, sure. There are some types of green tea or lapsang souchong. Did I get that right?
Lapsang Souchong, yeah.
Lapsang souchong. Okay. Sorry for my pronunciation. I can't see it as we're talking about
Sure.
it. Are there some kind of baselines that you find yourself drawn to that make for more attractive beer?
I think personally, I prefer the darker base teas, and they have a depth of character to them, and even on the with the green teas, I know that they definitely will extract a little bit more of that grassy character. So, um, I enjoy them, and if you kind of baby it correctly, but I think there's a lot of like if it goes wrong, it can go very wrong, and I think the darker teas are a little more forgiving. But there's so many variations of those. I mean, you can go, geez, there's varieties of tea. I mean, it's just like coffee. There's just grown in different regions,
Right,
or just the
right.
way that they're processed. Coffee, you have it can be sun like fermented or dried in the sun, or you can leave the fruit on. But like teas, they can be dried over wood fires. They can be fermented, and they could be open air fermented. They can be fermented in a controlled environment. So you can get a lot of character out of that. But you just need to. It's just experimentation and playing around.
What's the addition then process look like? Or are you making a liquid from the tea and then adding that into the fermentation? Do you
Mhm.
then or bag tea and add it into beer cold side, hot side? What do you tend to do with that?
We treat tea as a lot like coffee.
Okay.
So we'll dose things in a brink. So and then with a brink, so it's just a 15-gallon keg that we can that's converted with fittings and all that, and then we'll put our tea or coffee into that, and then whether it's whether we purge it out and fill it with beer, steep it, and then push it back in, and then we kind of taste it to see where it's at. You might need subsequent additions of tea, or you just might need more steeping time. That's just something you.
Ooh, a high intensity infusion. I like
Yeah.
that. I
Yep.
like that. And now, of
Uh,
course, I've yeah, like off the top of my head, I remember Main and Mill. That's the one way that they do that. Do a high intensity
mhm.
infusion and then dose back into the main tank taste in order to kind
Yeah.
of find the balance point on that.
Yep. And some teas get expressed better if we say fill it with hot water. So again, it's a purge tank, but we'll fill it with a little bit of water from a hot liquor tank,
Hmm.
which then gets the certain kind of extraction that we really like. And then some people will probably wince when I say we push it in hot, but overall, that those temperatures mix up well, and in a lot of those cases, the beer at that point is going to be filtered too, so there's at least less yeast that you're going to be cooking in that process. But overall net it'll raise the temperature maybe 1 or 2 degrees,
Hmm.
but it's a small amount. But just to get that heat, to get those right extracts that you're looking for, to get that flavor component. That's the other way we do it. But and then it's just monitoring the liquid that's both in the tank itself and then in the brink, because if you're sitting too long in the brink, coffee, you'll extract some of those green pepper flavors, and tea, you'll get tannins, you'll get grassiness, you'll get some unpleasant things. So if you're trying to look for more flavor, but you got to taste that liquid and see where it is, and if it has that flavor, nope, you'll just got to get more and go from there. Don't try to reuse the same stuff.
Sure, sure. And we should note that Lucky Envelope's around 1,500-ish barrels per year. It's a smaller brewery,
Yep.
and you all are making it happen without a huge capital outlay or the craziest newest equipment out there. It's not some of this is very figure it out, problem solve with with a limited and reasonable budget.
Yeah, and I don't want to say homebrewing is bad, but it's that homebrewer mentality that we still have to this day. Is like you're just scrappy.
Homebrewing's not bad.
No,
Homebrewing's great.
no, but some people say that it tastes homebrewy or something like that. So there's gonna be a bad connotation, but it's that scrappy mentality,
Sure,
and
sure.
we still use corny kegs in the brewery for certain things, and but at some point you kind of you'll move over to those 15-gallon brinks, but we play around with that, but it's making things work, and Frankenbrewing, we're not afraid to do that. I mean, those Grundies that you saw in the back of
yeah.
house. Those were pretty mangled monsters before, and then you just had to give them a little care and get a buddy who knows how to do some stainless steel welding, and then they can become usable, but there's still pain in the butts to deal with.
Sure. Let's talk about some other ingredients. But first, ABS Commercial is a full-service brewery outfitter, proud to offer brew houses, tanks, and small parts to brewers across the country. They stock equipment ranging from 3 barrels to 90 barrels and offer custom-designed equipment up to 900 barrels. Contact one of their brewery consultants today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your brewery project. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. Also, craft the perfect pour with superior fruit from the perfect puree. Picked at the peak of ripeness, the fruit is pureed and frozen for optimal fresh flavor and color. But don't just take our word for it. Experience flavor firsthand by curating your own complimentary sample box at perfectpuree.com/beer. That's perfectpuree, PUREE.com/beer. Samples are complimentary for brewing professionals only. So, from tea, where'd you start? What were some of the other ingredients that you started pushing into? And talk to me about some of your experimentation with those and dialing some of them in.
Yeah, so the other ingredients that we've played around with, those are a lot of them just inspired by whether it's travels from myself or my business partner, or things that we kind of grew up with as well. So what I mentioned, the beer, the Belgian triple with Thai lime leaves and lemongrass, that was a big flavor that was used all the time in Thailand, and that's where my spouse and I we took a trip a little bit after we got married, and we spent some time there, and we just love that flavor combination. So you kind of look at we kind of look at different cultures and see what foods and what flavor combinations are popular, and then we take those, taste them in the original context, and then see maybe how those can get folded in potentially into a beer that we would make, or a beer that we would like to make. And so one of the great things that my business that Ray does is he has family in Hong Kong. So kind of before pandemic, he'd go visit him, and cocktail bars were a great place because the style of cocktails.
Hong Kong cocktail bars.
Yeah, the style of cocktails that they would do there were significantly different than what's kind of going on in the States, and they're just different approach to it. And one time you might go there and it's just super heavy elderflower, and elderflower and this and this and this, and sometimes it might be rose hips. So there's some inspiration that you can pull from those, and we'll look at desserts, So if we want those to go into a stout, or if we want to go into some kind of IPA version, we like to play around with those. And sometimes it could be as simple as somebody at the brewery getting very excited about one thing, being fixated on that. And I think one of our accidental successful things was we did a hazy IPA with that was mango lassi based, and that was just one of our former brewers, Josh, who just wouldn't shut up about mango lassis, trying to get mango lassis to
right
at the end of a meal or something like that, and just it kind of at some point it kind of gets in your head, and then you think, how could we use this in a beer? So there's a lot of inspiration that we pull from those, and then it's just playing around. And that's one of the beautiful things about brewing is, there's that science part, and you need to make sure your processes are dialed in and solid. But then there is the art that you can play around with that kind of more pulls that cooking side, where you can experiment with flavors, and you start them on the pilot system, or with small infusions, and then you kind of scale up from there, and you kind of see which processes work, which processes won't work on a large scale, and see how those flavors combine. And with that, it combined some of my favorite things I love to do kind of in my personal time, which is cooking and
sure,
and all
sure.
that.
Are there inevitably, as you're experimenting through these things, you found some things that just you want to work but they just don't work? Are there some ingredients that you've just found as much as you try, you can't make them work, and that you've just kind of moved on from.
Define doesn't work. Well, no, in my head, we've talked about it, but it usually came up as a joke. Is like durian is the infamous
Oh yeah.
Southeast Asian fruit that is banned on subways, and it just stinks. And it smells, in my opinion, it smells horrible. And I think in the majority of people's opinion, it smells horrible. But I think it tastes nice, and it's a delicacy that some people like, but it's a very polarizing thing. And this past for April Fools, we joke around about it, and we said like we're gonna do it, and it caused a lot of frowny faces. But then there were some people that absolutely love durian, and they ended up buying growlers of it and clearing it out. We're like, oh, well. So, personally, it didn't work for me. I appreciated it for what it was.
Sure.
But then, there's a reason why that fruit still exists, and some people love it. So it didn't work for what I liked, but so
that is amazing that you found that small number of that. Like, I mean, if I'm looking at the Venn diagram between durian fruit fans and craft beer fanatics who will come to Ballard in Seattle, I mean that's a narrow slice.
Yeah, and we would get people just like 2 weeks later saying, "Do you have that beer left?" We said, "No." We ended up making 2 kegs of it or something, and by the end of the weekend, because word got around, people were filling up growlers. It was mostly out, and then 2 weeks later, people are saying, "Did you still have it?" And we're out, but initially I was pushing back, saying, "Oh crap, we should have just made a 6-barrel. Nobody's going to want this. We're going to have to give it in little samples, and people are just going to dump it." But no, it's just
careful
it's great.
what you joke about, because you might have to make more of that beer.
We do that, and we're not, again, to that end, we're not afraid to fail, and that's we're not afraid to learn more. We're not afraid to get better and take our licks where we take them. But we also have a healthy acceptance of failure, as long as it's not like people getting injured or anything like that.
Sure.
And we want if it's a safe way, and safe failures are the best failures. I think, in my opinion, that's how you grow the most.
So then, talk to me about some of these combinations and blending. One of the big things that you employ with all of these flavorful beers is adding elements of flavor without overwhelming in that kind of flavor. You're looking for these to add nuance, but you don't want to lose sight of the beer in it either. Obviously, that's a common refrain. We all still like beer that tastes like beer, that has some echoes and some additional flavors in it, but it still should taste like beer. Talk to me about how you then layer and blend flavors within some of these, or again, like match some of these ingredients to specific styles of beer that might highlight certain elements of those flavors in more captivating ways.
Yeah, a lot of it comes from just an excess of patience and willingness to work with ingredients and a beer, and also knowing when to kind of just walk away and don't get yourself stuck in that sunk cost fallacy. But for example, every year, that's probably the most requested beer we do is a pale ale that we do with habañero and shishito peppers, and yeah, that's what a lot of people think originally. But what we get rid of the ribs and seeds in the habaneros, so that there's a spicy kick, but it's not habanero spicy, and that is one of the. How do
you get rid of those? Do you hand process those?
Yep.
Oh my God.
It's
what a terrible day in the brewery.
Yeah, it's
we're cleaning out peppers today.
Yep, nitrile gloves, because the capsaicin doesn't go through the nitrile, but we'll still double glove those, and then that's anywhere between 6
eye
to
covering or goggles. I mean,
6 to 12 hours of processing peppers, and it might only be 20 pounds of peppers, but that's a lot of peppers that fits in 20 pounds.
Right.
But then so you dose it, but that the experimentation comes into play where like what's a good dosing level to start with, and then but because peppers and natural ingredients, fruits, vegetables, whatever, they vary on a daily, weekly basis, depending on where you're sourcing them from. So you have to be very careful about how you're dosing it, and it's a taste as you go thing. So we will add the, a baseline amount. So like we have like a couple years of data build up, and then you say, all right, let's cut that value by half or 2/3. And then you go from there, because some of those peppers might be super duper hot. Some of them you just might not get a spicy bunch at all. So you just gotta figure it out. And it's when you're doing 10 barrels of that or something, it even like 10 of the super spicy habaneros can make a difference, which is kind of crazy. But
so you're adding then fresh peppers,
yes,
not dried.
No, we don't do the dried ones for that specific beer. But
do you process the peppers after you've cleaned them out? Do you
yes.
Pulse them, or
we do the clean of them, and then we'll hold them in sanitizer for a little bit. That gets us at least a degree of kind of rinse and cleaning, and then we'll
sanitizer. I love that.
Yeah. Then
that's a great way to refer to that. I know what you're talking about. We'll just call it that.
And then we freeze it, and then the freezing breaks apart the walls, and we'll add that all in a bag into the beer, and then just that's how it steeps. We've tried doing a couple things where you might try to pasteurize it in a vacuum bag, and that kills that fresh flavor. So again, it's a lot of experimentation and just layering those in the way. And yeah, after 7 years, you kind of get a feel for it. And so I feel like it becomes a little more natural now. But again, you learn when you're training people up, our awesome brewers Peter and Megan, that there's a lot that goes on in my head that if I don't vocalize correctly, there's a very easy miscommunication between the three of us.
Sure. Do you adjust recipes in any way, in terms of kind of grain and grist to knowing that there's going to be that kind of heat? Do you try to, push maybe a little more residual sweetness to it, or dryness for that matter? Or is it more just a addition to a standard pale ale?
We definitely will adjust things. Whether I think the big thing for us is the alcohol level. I think, in my personal opinion, I think a lower alcohol beer works better with that fresh pepper flavor. Whether it's just the extraction or just my personal preference, I honestly don't know. But I think that kind of like 5 to 6% range for that specific beer is the way that it kind of it pops up. But say for our Lapsang Souchong Helles, that's just that's our base Helles that we go with. And if we have a couple kegs of that lying around, or 5 barrels, and we can do an infusion, it's a lot of fun. And yeah, we'll definitely jump at that chance.
Yeah. After peppers, are there any other interesting ingredients or some layered ingredients that you find work with each other really well?
Yeah, that pandan leaves. That was the one that we just did recently with a barrel aged beer. It's a grass that grows in Southeast Asia, and it's used in a lot of desserts there. And our brewer Peter described it really well as saying it's kind of if creme brulee had a little whiff of grass and was a perfume. It's just this beautiful, perfumey, flowery, sweet, caramelly grass, and it's absolutely delicious. And that's why they make like a lot of cream based desserts, is because you can do your hot steep of your milk with those, and it just adds this beautiful complex layer of caramelly sweetness and just floral grass. It's a really fun one. And then throwing that into our barrel aged imperial stout, it's a way to get that kind of vanilla character, but with a little bit of a twist. That one is probably one of my favorite blends that we've played around with. And then
how do you go about adding it?
We will do that's one that we will actually pasteurize. So we'll put it in, we'll vacuum seal it, and then we will submerge it in hot water.
Sous vide?
Sous vide, exactly.
Nice.
And then we bag it, and then we'll throw it in, so that there's less of a risk of contamination of the ingredient, but also just to extract those flavors. And working those into...
You're not pasteurizing on the back end as beer comes out. So
exactly.
You gotta be careful about those ingredients as they go in.
Definitely. One of the really fun ones that we've done was, like 5 spice. We did that into our, every year for our Lunar New Year celebration. We'll do a beer we call Double Happiness, and with that. That's imperial stout that we do barrel aged, and the five spice works. It's a very popular sweet, savory side spice that you'll taste in a lot of things. Like what comes to a lot of people's mind is like the five spice duck that you'll have at a Chinese restaurant, like during a festival or some celebration. But I remember making a tort one time using five spice, so that five spice has that like ginger and clove and anise, and there's a bunch of cinnamon, and the fifth one I do not recall, but the five spices can also vary, but those flavors go super well with chocolate. So in my head, that's where I just made that leap, like, oh, chocolate and like imperial stout. That's a rich dessert that kind of mimics the five spice chocolate tort that I remember making once, and that was a really well received one. It's not a traditional flavoring, but yeah, it's a fun one, and those are flavors that can go into beer, and it just Lunar New Year's during the wintertime, so it's a variation of a spiced imperial stout, and I think people have really appreciated that. And when we do it, we're not looking to just like throw all these flavors at the consumer, but we want to just add like some nuance in there, make it interesting, that makes your eyebrow raising. What's this? And then you have to go in for a second sip, but we also don't want to make it like something where you're just confused.
Sure. And does your addition process look like tea with that one, with a high intensity infusion that you then dose back in, or?
That one, those can vary. But again, a lot of times it'll be a spice, like a pasteurization. And then those spices, for the most part, will go directly into the tank. And those in particular require an extra amount of patience, because it's really easy to overspice. And we undershoot by a lot, and then we'll just add a little bit more. So it can take up to 2 weeks to get those levels right. But
how do you get that to integrate properly in the beer, especially if you're putting a powder of spice on top of a liquid in the tank? Then making sure that integrates properly in the liquid can be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and that's just agitation at that point. We make it a slurry, so we use hot water and then vacuum seal that, pasteurize it, and that again helps draw out some of those essential oils. And then you kind of squeeze it in the tank, and it's always fun when you miss the tank, or miss the little manway or the little port in the tank, and it just looks like somebody took a poop on the top of your fermenter.
Oh,
and it
great.
looks great. Yeah, it's a great visualization. We don't post those pictures on social media.
Yeah.
But you just add that in there, and then just time for them to soak, and then you just do your tank rouses when you need to try to integrate it. And then after a day or two, you'll see where the spice level is, and then you just add a little bit more.
Sure. Are there any other particular standout ingredients? I'm pushing you hard on
there's a lot.
Piece
Off the top of my head, no. Those are the ones that like come out as like the ones that have worked really well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, in terms of other beers, are there any other styles that you might consider yourselves learning on right now, and pushing some knowledge so that you can continue to develop and improve those beers?
In terms of like base styles or
Sure.
whichever.
Is there something that you're pursuing right now that in that kind of scope of learning, trying to figure out and solve some problems around?
I mean, it's always our lagers. We're always striving to try to get those into a place that we're happier with them. Like we're already happy with a lot of them, but playing around with more challenging, more obscure beers that you might not have references to. And I know that you had a recent article posted by Evan Rail, and he's Mr. Czech beer.
Yeah,
and he did the Tmave Pivo, and that's one of those beers that we're actually looking to work on. And like those dark lagers, they're just due to popularity or maybe lack thereof. Those aren't beers that we get to experiment around with on a frequent basis. And when we do, we want to make sure they're as done as well as possible. But brewing is always an iterative process. So we love that style of beer, and we want to make that. And we're actually working on a collaboration with Andy Johnson, Evan Rail, Marcus Baskerville, and Bottle Works, which is a local Seattle brewery, and we're gonna try to make
the perfect Czech dark lager.
I wish it was perfect. It's gonna be a good one. But,
what an amazing lineup of folks to be working on that.
It's
That's
fun.
exciting.
It's always fun when you have a friend that can just say, "Oh, let me ask some people," and then she can wrangle the team, and it's a very fortunate position to be in, and we're really happy to have Annie as a friend.
How are you going to figure out how to decoct on your system, Barry? I mean, because I don't know. Don't know that you can make this
it's
to Evan's standards
I know.
unless you decoct.
Our whole thing is, Evan's a cool guy, and he understands. But
he's flexible.
Yes, we know that it's not going to be a traditional Czech style lager in that respect with the decoction, and but we're working with our system, and I think there's a lot that we can do to make the beer right, and you might have that one lacking thing, which yes, in the traditional sense it is a major thing, but I don't think not having decoction as a method should prevent anybody from approaching lagers, whether they're traditionally decocted or not. Decoction is, to me, just another ingredient. And if you're, my whole thing always goes back to like a burger, and sometimes you want a great burger, and to me, decoctions like caramelized onions. You need that meat. You need the meat to be perfect. You need that that ground chuck, brisket, like all those things in there. The fat to meat ratio. You need fresh toppings. You need that bread has to be great, and if you don't have that caramelized onion, sometimes you don't miss it, but sometimes there's not a substitute for caramelized onions as well. So I think I have the confidence that we can make a really tasty, well-made beer, but we need to, Evan's a cool guy.
I have every confidence that you all, that group of people can make a fantastic beer. Sure. Well, let's pull back out. Let's talk about, the big picture for Lucky Envelope. You're now 7 years into it. You've gone through these phases. You've grown more confident in your ability to express what the Lucky Envelope brand means to you. You've gone through this kind of development. What do you see on the near-term horizon? What's the long-term horizon? What do you hope to achieve with Lucky Envelope? Mm-hmm. And what does success look like for Lucky Envelope?
Yeah. So obviously the first thing of success is for us to be able to stay in business and continue to grow. But as we've done, we grow. Our intentions are to grow at a measured pace. But the nice part with the crew that we have and the way that we've, the way I feel like we structure and run the brewery, is there's a lot of feedback and a lot of back and forth with us and our staff, and they're very good at sustaining themselves, and they know how to run the ship, and they know how to make those corrections when corrections need to happen. And with that, that's allowed a lot of time for both myself and Ray to kind of branch out and pursue some of those things that we're really excited about and things that we're passionate about. For Ray, he does a lot of work with conservation, so he works with Washington Wild, and he wants to pursue a little bit more of those working on boards of committees for DEI.
Mm-hmm.
So he's on the board for Washington Wild, the organization for DEI, and he's also co-chair of the Washington Brewers Guild DEI program. For me, I've grown up in this beer industry being supported by so many people. So the big thing that I want to do is share my knowledge. I want to help people that are getting into the industry. And the way that one of my friends really described it really well is if you want to try to increase diversity in the brewing industry, you don't want to the brewing industry is a deck of cards. You don't want to be pulling cards from somebody else's hand to supposedly make yourself a little more diverse. What you want to do is you want to get new cards, you want a new deck introduced, and to bring people in the industry, foster that love of craft beer, foster that thirst for knowledge, and to that end, that's what I like to do. So I like to I'm a member of the Brewers Association mentorship group, where they have a program where they have it's like 10 weeks, five people, and you get to mentor for various positions like leadership, social media, marketing, and I do quality and brewery operations. So I get to meet a lot of aspiring professionals and professionals who are looking to advance, and I can try to give some of my perspective on kind of what I've learned starting a business and growing up in the industry, and continue to pursue knowledge. So between that and being involved with the CBC seminar subcommittee too, those are all ways that I like to give back and at least try to spread my knowledge around and share it, and try to foster love and passion for the industry. So between all those, and then just still continue to just like dive into technical papers and all that. That's we want to grow, we want to continue to be successful, and we want to make sure our quality stays there. But to be able to give back and share parts of ourselves into other people, so that they can start their legacy, and that's where we're passionate.
That's fantastic. And of course, everyone wants to be able to express who they are in their business and their life. And, it's great that things are getting to that point now with craft beer where you can be who you are.
Absolutely.
And people find you for that. Also, that the audience for craft beer is bigger than it was. The craft beer is reaching communities that may not have felt that it was relevant to them before. That's an important part of all of this work. Again, not just trying to dice up the pie in one different way. Let's bake a few more pies and make it bigger, so that the communities can have craft beer and feel that connection to it in ways that they may not have
absolutely
earlier before. So that's fantastic. Thanks for joining me on this. For nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. NA is no problem with the Alchemator from ProBrew. Think outside the puree box with Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends. Trust American Canning with your packaging needs. ABS Commercial is a full-service brewery outfitter for brewers across the country, and craft the perfect pour with superior fruit from the perfect puree. Of course, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button. Let us know this content matters. Support our work with great writers like Annie Johnson, Evan Rail, and others who are fantastic. Annie's, of course, a regular contributor to Craft Beer and Brewing magazine and writes the No Rests for the Wicked column for the magazine, with great column every issue for extract brewers out there, and is, of course, a wonderful person also, and a good friend of yours. We're here in Seattle, and I didn't get to see her, unfortunately, on this trip, but maybe next time I'm up here. Barry, if people want to learn more about you, about Lucky Envelope and the beer that you're making here in Seattle, where do they find you all?
They can find us, luckyenvelopebrewing.com. That's our website. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Lucky ENV Brewing. And that's where we are, and we're out and about.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. This is it's great to see you again, and awesome. Can't wait to see you again in the future.
It won't be long. I promise. Yeah. Cheers. This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.